Salute that pile of walking pus. Salute my ass.
George A. Romero. Following the success of Dawn of the Dead, Romero would return to the world of the Flesh Eaters years later as his rabid fan base waited with excitement. The film that was delivered would be quite the shock to the system. With Night of the Living Dead, viewers were comfortable. A strong, good-natured hero like Ben carried fans throughout this unorthodox home invasion film until the picture's climax. The controversial ending may have appalled the casual audience. For many, it was the gateway into this gritty world that is extremely unapologetic. Years later, Romero would finally return with his long-awaited sequel, Dawn of the Dead. A horror social commentary about the world as Romero saw it was heading. With its charismatic heroes, colorful palettes, and a more bombastic comic book feel, Dawn of the Dead will be the perfect palate cleanser audiences were clamoring for. The arrival of the 80s introduced viewers to a more dark and sinister world. Gone were the days of heroes and bad guys, good versus evil. All that is left are shades of gray, the absolute bottom of the barrel of what's left on planet Earth. Released on July 19th, 1985 in the United States, George A. Romero's Day of the Dead would finally be unleashed to Romero's zombie-starved fan base. The film would surprise audiences with its cold-hearted take and cruel vision the film had for our world. Romero foreseen it, most of the world simply couldn't understand as most viewers were left polarized. Day of the Dead is a very bleak and cruel film. Unlike its past two predecessors, the film doesn't shy away from the fact that quite possibly humanity is far worse than the undead. Years following Dawn of the Dead, the entire world has been consumed by the Flesh Eaters. Civilization left in absolute ruins, no longer protected by the social structure society once had in place. The dwindling survivors, now vastly outnumbered by their flesh-eating counterparts, are scattered throughout the ravaged Earth. A small group of scientists and the soldiers assigned to protect them take refuge in an underground bunker, once a Grand Nike missile installation, complete with a colossal elevator platform that once functioned to transporting massive warheads to the surface of the vast Everglades. Below the exterior, the scientists continue working on a solution to end the zombie plague, while the soldiers proceed to grow the best marijuana plants in all of Florida. Dr. Sarah Bowman, along with her lover, Private Miguel Salazar, are tasked with a small group of civilians, including communications expert Bill McDermott and helicopter pilot John, to leave the underground bunker and fly to Fort Myers in search of other survivors. Salazar's infamous bullhorn announcement, calling out for anyone that's left, is severely drowned out by the haunting moans of all that is left. The dead horde awakens from slumber. This is their world now. Sarah and Miguel quickly exit in sheer panic and return to base shortly. At ground level, Salazar is on the verge of a mental breakdown and his relationship with Sarah is crumbling fast. The bad news continues to percolate as the passing of military detachment's officer in charge, Major Cooper, has been revealed by Johnson, a young soldier played by a babyface Greg Nicotero. Tensions within the group continue escalating as John expresses his concerns to Sarah that everything they are doing is a complete waste of precious time, something they don't have much left of. We then meet Dr. Logan, the lead scientist. His ghastly approach to dissecting and dismembering zombies has earned Logan the nickname Dr. Frankenstein among the soldiers. Within good reason. A collection of undead can be seen strapped to gurneys and chained to the walls. Not to mention all that fucking blood everywhere. Just what is Dr. Logan doing with all these specimens? This is where the clash between Sarah and Logan dwells. Logan believes the solution is to make the undead docile, domesticating them like animals, while Sarah concludes that searching for what's making the virus happen and how to possibly cure it is more important. Logan's psychosis is once again questioned when Sarah discovered the dead, faceless corpse strapped to the trolley is none other than the recently deceased Major Cooper. Sarah's concerns begin to exasperate as the fear of what the soldiers would do to retaliate if they would ever discover the secret only adds to her growing anxiety. Private Steele and Private Rickles, two of the most vile and foul human beings possible, are tasked to corral more zombie specimens for Frankenstein's disturbing experiments. Steele and Rickles, who act more like henchmen than soldiers, request for Miguel to assist them, but Sarah doesn't believe Salazar is up for it, considering he's on the brink of collapsing under vigorous stress. Miguel disagrees, most likely due to not looking like a pussy in front of his girlfriend. Deep within the underground bunker are miles of an abandoned mine. The scenery is dreary and cold. The chilling moans echoing throughout the mine are a call of hunger. Private Steele does his best shit-talking to stir up the undead. Meanwhile, Miguel ain't looking too hot. Rickles' obnoxious laughter seems to further invigorate Steele, biggest meat in the cave. The heckling has drawn a small group of undead as they slowly march towards our survivors. As the intensity fuels, Steele manages to snare one of the zombies, locking it in place within the stalls. A nervous Miguel can't handle the situation and drops the pole holding the zombie at bay. The walking corpse escapes and lunges towards Rickles before Sarah can take control of the situation. Miguel's fractured mental state almost cost Rickles his life.
You almost killed Rickles. Yeah, you almost...
Back inside, a group meeting is called by the hilariously unstable Captain Rhodes, who took over after the death of Major Cooper. Rhodes doesn't have a shred of empathy and isn't in favor of constantly sending what little is left of his men to capture zombie specimens for Doc Frankenstein. As the tensions between the scientists and soldiers escalate due to limited supplies and communication equipment adequate enough to reach other survivors, dubious progress in research also has the two sides firmly divided. Captain Rhodes scolds Sarah for doping up Miguel when he's short on manpower and requests Dr. Logan's presence in the next meeting. Sarah abruptly leaves the only way she knows how.
Yes, sir! Fuck you, sir!
Between the berating verbal abuse of the soldiers, Miguel's sanity, and the lack of aid from John and Billy, Sarah is having her own existential crisis in silence. To be fair, John and Billy Boy aren't bad people, they just don't give a fuck. Back inside the meeting room, Captain Rhodes does his best to intimidate the civilian group, which includes Dr. Fisher, played by Martin himself, John Artlist, who also played this guy. And this guy. And this guy too. Sarah has had enough of the bickering and decides to leave. Captain Rhodes threatens Sarah by having Steele shoot her if she didn't sit down. And if Steele didn't cooperate well, Rhodes would have to execute him instead. What a guy. And to make matters worse, look who finally decided to show up. Rhodes begins to question Logan, but Frankenstein keeps cutting him off until the captain unleashes possibly the greatest moment in this entire film.
I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck you're doing with my time.
Captain Rhodes exhibits his menace by riling up his men in support of blowing the piss out of every last zombie just outside their walls. Dr. Logan sarcastically shuts down Rhodes, speaking logic about what their current situation really is. They are in the minority now, and nowhere near the resources and firepower to cut down the horde of undead awaiting them topside. Logan continues to speak, feeding Rhodes what he needs to hear to get that monkey off of the scientist's back. Sarah then proceeds to make the worst decision possible and shuts down Logan in front of Rhodes, discrediting his research and dividing the group further into the abyss of uncertainty. Rhodes gives the civilian team a bit more time before the threat of martial law and the execution of anyone that fucks with his command. Burdened by all of the stress, Sarah visits John and Billy to get drunk after a hellish nightmare, leading her to break away from Miguel for good. The two friends sit quietly by their RV as far as away from the others as possible in the most elaborate living space, just minding their own business. John admits to Sarah that he and Billy don't believe in the work Sarah and the scientists are doing in that bunker. John's conviction that the zombie apocalypse was a divine retribution against all of mankind shakes Sarah to her core. By taking their chopper, escaping to a beautiful island, procreating and starting over. That's what John really believes in. Sarah still has her reservations though. Soon after, Dr. Logan, in hopes of securing the goodwill of Captain Rhodes and his men, works on results diligently. Logan demonstrates his favorite specimen, Bub, a docile zombie with a strange cooperation to Logan and his research. Bub is a bit different because he remembers bits of his past life and displays basic rudimentary human behavior. Rhodes pays Logan a visit and isn't impressed with teaching the undead tricks. Despite Rhodes' lack of confidence in Logan, he agrees to let Frankenstein round up more zombies to further his deranged work. During the routine roundup, an undead liberates itself from the harness that poor Salazar was grasping. The zombie attacks Miller, ripping his neck as his gunfire rips through Johnson. Sarah pops the zombie in the head as the gunshot echoes throughout the compound. Miguel loses it and begins to wrestle with another zombie, which looks to have been a priest, but his prayers go unanswered as the flesh eater takes a large chunk out of a private's arm. Steele executes the zombie before putting a bullet into the head of a distraught Miller. Miguel runs off into the darkness. Captain Rhodes and his men pursue Sarah and Miguel. John and Bill help Sarah amputate Miguel's arm, followed by cauterizing the bloody stump in the most excruciating way possible. Rhodes and his men arrive and demand they hand over Miguel. John and Billy strap up in defense of Sarah and Miguel as Rhodes threatens to pull his men from supporting their research and the destruction of all of the zombies Logan has in custody. Sarah promises to destroy Miguel herself if he turns. Well, let's just say Rhodes isn't taking that lightly. The shit is really hitting the fan now as Salazar is in terrible shape. To ease his suffering, Sarah and Bill go looking for medical supplies. The operating theater is a house of horrors as some of Logan's most bizarre and insane secrets are discovered. Billy Boy quickly realizes they should indeed take that chopper and escape this prison. Meanwhile, Frankenstein and Bub's relationship further amplifies. It's not what Bub does, it's what he doesn't do. He doesn't see Logan as lunch. Howard Sherman, who portrayed Bub, should have won an award for his portrayal of this intelligent zombie. You can buy into an undead suddenly having a conscience, and that's not easy to do. When Logan teaches Bub how to play the tape recorder, Bub's expression of delight and wonder never ceases to amaze. Dr. Logan has always barked that reward is the key to making the creatures behave. Bub's progress and cooperation earned his reward this night, a bucket filled to the brim with the dead soldiers' blood-soaked remains. Sarah and Bill are disturbed, jaws to the ground. They can't fathom what they are witnessing. The situation only escalates when Rhodes and his men enter the laboratory. Dr. Frankenstein attempts to explain, but the sight of the fresh viscera that was once his own men sends Rhodes into a fiery rage. Logan gets torn apart from Rhodes' M16 as his bullet-riddled corpse slumps onto the cold, refrigerated floor. Let's be real, Captain Rhodes didn't give a shit about his men. He's been looking for a reason to whack Dr. Frankenstein for a long time now.
Humans, you must stop. You must stop now. Bananas are for monkeys. Stop eating the monkey's food. Stop eating the banana after working out.
With the remaining scientists and civilians stripped of their weapons, Rhodes attempts to have John fly him and his men to safety, away from the madness of being sheltered for so long. Of course John declines when it's revealed his friends would be left behind. Rhodes proceeds to execute Dr. Fisher in cold blood, sending shivers down our hero's spines. Sarah and Bill are then locked inside the undead corral, forced to fend for their lives without their weapons. Meanwhile, John is beaten into submission after knocking out Private Torres, but his loyalty remains strong. Back in the lab, Bub breaks free of his chains, using his teeth only to discover the remains of his mentor, Dr. Logan. Bub actually shows emotion and breaks down over the death of his friend before picking up a pistol off of the ground and seeking stone cold, sweet revenge. On top of all of this shit is Miguel fucking Salazar. This fucking guy. Above ground, a disturbed and defeated Miguel releases the chain off of the fence and lets all of the hungry flesh eaters inside of the compound, following Miguel to his death on top of a missile elevator platform where the zombies rip Salazar apart, but not before the button is pushed and the elevator descends, luring all of the undead into the bunker as well. The disturbing sounds of the elevator alarm alert the soldiers something is wrong. As John is left alone with only an incapacitated Torres and Rhodes, the charismatic pilot gets the upper hand on Rhodes and takes him the fuck out. After stealing the captain's favorite pistols, John seeks to rescue his friends deep into the mine. After awakening from his slumber, discovering that Miguel has ripped apart the control panels, Captain Rhodes panics and leaves his men behind as he commandeers a golf cart. Steele, Rickles, and Torres all lose their minds and go off into different directions on foot. One by one, Rhodes' men are secluded and swarmed before being ripped apart in some of the absolute best practical gore effects in horror cinema up until that point. Horror icon Tom Savini quite possibly delivered his best work to date. Torres' scream still causes nightmares to this day as his vocal cords are stretched until pop. Soon after, Captain Rhodes would get his comeuppance as he is being stalked by an armed bub all throughout the complex. Somehow, this is turning into a different kind of a horror movie. After receiving a few slugs into his shoulder and lower back, Rhodes' attempt of escape is soon turned on its head as a horde of malnourished zombies wait for him on the other side. One last shot to the abdomen and Rhodes is viciously devoured as the greatest zombie death scene ever filmed blesses your eyeballs. Rhodes is ripped clean in half as the zombies feast on his remains, all while Rhodes is still screaming. Bub mocks Rhodes one last time before moving on with whatever is left of his existence. Finally, John reunites with Bill and Sarah as they fight their way out of the mines, proving they have more to offer other than just lounging around. Together, the three escape into the helicopter and find themselves basking on a perfectly splendid island, living their best lives until what comes next. Day of the Dead is considered George Romero's favorite film by the man himself. It's one the real trolls enjoy. Most audiences heavily dislike this film due to its muted tone, awful characters, and its downright claustrophobic setting and severely pervasive language. With an original script once deemed as the Ben-Hur of zombie films, Romero was forced to cut out many ambitious ideas in favor of going into the cinemas unrated. Some of those ideas would end up in 2005's Land of the Dead. For those who dismiss this film as nothing but cruel and disgusting, they kinda missed the point. It was supposed to be because that is all that was left. At the end of the world, all that would remain are the roaches and the undead. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Well, minus the roaches. Hey, at least we got a happy ending. Thank you for driving down to the Horror Fiend Drive-In Theater. Stay scared.
We be punished by the Creator. Is it a curse?